Hello. Thank you for joining us today. We have an amazing panel that we're super excited to share with you. I'm Michelle Galina. I am the marketing manager for After Effects. And I have the distinct privilege of introducing you to three amazing visual effects artists. And we're going to talk about realistic visual effects, what it means today and for the future of our business. Our first guest is Jacob Danell. Jacob specializes in visual effects and special effects. From planning shots to compositing, he started making films on VHS without a computer and moved on to make Sweden's first highly visual disaster movie in 2018. He loves to use the latest technology to generate the next great visual effect. And here is his reel.
Somehow we lost our way. I don't know how we did it. We went so off course, and now you acting on your pain. Does this mean that we're over? Gotta let me know. Lay it on me, lay it on me. I'm saying we're cut in stone. You know we might not make it. Lay it on me, lay it on me. I'm saying this love is holding us, but are we gonna make it?
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our next guest, our next guest is Daniel Hashimoto, but do not call him that. You call him Hashi. Hashi works for DreamWorks Animation for 10 years before finding independent success with his family's YouTube channel, Action Movie Kids. Their home videos mixed with some visual effects magic had earned them over 1 million subscribers. Hashi now also teaches at-home VFX techniques on Red Giant's series Cheap Tricks. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Michelle.
We're just going to show you a little bit of Hashi's work.
Verbazen serie. It's kind of like a real gun.
What do you have?
You remember how to use it?
I went down.
Let's see it, buddy.
Buddy, wait.
Okay.
Guys, thanks for watching a mega compilation.
We're so excited to have you here, Hashi. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Peter Eszenyi, I knew I was going to do it. Peter Eszenyi is a VFX supervisor and creative director whose portfolio includes major motion pictures like Blade Runner 2049, Ghost in the Shell, and Pacific Rim Uprising. Excuse me. He leads design teams and supervises visual effects for feature films, television shows, and commercials. He is particularly interested in solving creative problems with experimenting with new techniques and helping to develop future technologies in the process. He is a member of the Visual Effects Society, and he and his team have recently completed work on the much anticipated The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance series by Netflix. And here is Peter's reel. Fabulous.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for anybody, but however, I don't have a particular person, but I'll start with you, Peter, because you just showed your
Okay.
reel. Tell me a little bit about the work that you do and what you do and the types of movies that you worked on in your life.
Thank you very much for inviting me first, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I worked on small films, I worked on big films, and I think each of those have their own challenges. I also worked on commercials, which sort of like ties a little bit more into the world that you do, guys. I don't know. I like them all. I like films. I like the idea of being able to do something that wasn't there before and create new worlds. That's a big thing to say, but I think that's what we all try to do as artists and being in this industry. I like it all.
You like it all. How about you? Tell us a little bit about
No,
your
absolutely.
story.
I used to like to make videos with our home video camera. It was a Betamax. It was tethered to 2 decks that you had to wheel around with an extension cord and try to add in whatever visual effects or film my computer monitor playing an animation in between things. And I still sort of do that. I haven't grown up a whole lot. But I really like mixing real life with fantasy as kind of a thing. And so I continue to do that professionally now, remarkably.
Super clear that you like to do that.
Yes.
What about you, Jake?
Yeah, I always love to take shots to the next level to make that thing that's almost possible and make it a little bit more better. From when we were small, filming with VHS before we even touched the computer. For example, we threw darts at each other and just while we were filming one person, the other one put the dart in the shirt and the other threw it down on the ground and we panned quick. And me and my brother got yelled out from our father like, "How can you do this? Come on!" And from there it just continued to make more and better visual effects that hopefully people can't see how it's made, but with very easy tricks still.
What would you say is the hardest thing to accomplish? Or what's the hardest thing, but it's super important for visual effects? What is in terms of complexity, what is the most valuable thing?
Authenticity, I would say.
Authenticity.
Yeah, to make the shot look realistic, I think it's more important than for the shot to look extreme. If you have flying cameras and all 3D and it doesn't look real, I think, or at least for me, I get pulled out from the experience. And it's very hard to make a really good selling shot. Mm-hmm. So to have that in the back of the mind from the beginning when you start planning out instead of just we do it in post, helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
Would
really
you
have to
agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, authenticity is a huge part of selling a visual effects shot. I also think that character and story have a remarkable amount more to do with stuff than as a very technical filmmaker I want to admit. But caring about a story or about what's going on screen buys you into that world a lot better. And again, things that are authentic are a lot easier to sell, like cool character moments that are enhanced by visual effects than, like, say, a complete immersive, absurd environment where you have to buy into the world first. And you're doing that extra work on top of trying to just sell a vision or something like that.
That was a full-on lead-in for you, Drew.
I have to agree with that, and I think it's crucially important that we have to know that we play a supporting role in the creative process. It's not about visual effects or special effects themselves. It's about how we can contribute to something that makes an idea even better or makes an idea possible. And if you accept that fact, then I think your contribution becomes absolutely important and crucial for a film or a storytelling from a storytelling point of view. So we play a supporting role, but we like to do that really, really well. I think that's pretty much where we can fit into this ecosystem.
Absolutely.
One of your bents, or my experience with working with you, Peter, because you and I have known each other for a few years now, is that you really have a niche about creating futuristic visual effects. How does that play?
That's correct. And for quite a few years, I mostly worked on films which sort of like had some sort of futuristic technology part to them. And on one hand, it's really, really great because you sort of like imagine yourself as someone who has at least some idea about what's going to happen in the future, and you try to turn that into something that plays into the narrative, and it's a great place to be. But I think I personally felt that I definitely have to broaden my sort of like world, if you will, to include other things as well, not just futuristic stuff, not just science fiction. You have to go back to the past sometimes. You have to venture into unknown areas to be able to do that. Because I think I can do a much better futuristic idea now that I did some stuff which is not absolutely futuristic. So I think it's great. You have to expand your horizons all the time. I'm pretty sure you agree with that.
Yeah, I think that most of the visual effects artists that I've met have relatively short attention spans. And that's not necessarily for their work, but it is for the types of works that they do or the type of shots that you push through a computer. We don't stew on things for very long. And you can spend a million years on a shot, but at some point the variety, I think, really ends up driving what you get to do. And it's the only way to expand your creativity is to challenge yourself with something that you've never tackled before. So I would imagine that almost every new project brings on something that you've never tried before, but have like some confidence to try out. But yeah, hopefully like you assume that you'll figure it out as you go.
That's actually really good advice for people who are wanting to be into VFX, is that push yourself and try yourself to the next great thing. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is just a play.
You have to
Like
play.
you have to play, you have to try out new things, have small projects for your own just to do in a weekend to expand, because if you do the same thing over and over, you will get stuck there. And so you really have to play.
I think you have to fail sometimes. Failure is something that we are really afraid of because we always think of failure as something as a judgment on how well you do things. But it's not about that. It's part of the learning process. If you think about it, how it works, when you start out in visual effects or start to try to learn how to walk, you just fall on your face a lot of times. But that enables you to learn how to walk, and it's very similar with how the learning curve in visual effects or in this filmmaking business works, I think, because you experiment with things, you try out new things. Sometimes they look cool, sometimes they don't, but never be afraid of experimenting with new things.
That's right.
For sure. I mean, I agree with that a lot, especially, I mean, I've used After Effects as long as I can remember, since 3.1, I think. And what I like about it is how iterative it is. It's an interesting environment where you can try something that will look bad the first 1,000 times you see it. And that's what's kind of really fun about it, is that you can make something that's bad a little better and a little better and a little better. And then at some point you need to release it to the world, I suppose. But And that can be challenging, but the speed at which you can try and fail in VFX is a lot, because you can spend all day trying and failing 400 times, and then you do it the next day.
I was talking to a really well-known VFX artist, and he was telling me that one of the keys to his success is to help people not to screw up sooner. Because sometimes you can be 5 days into a project and you went, oh no.
I think it's crucial. Never. You don't have to achieve perfection at the first time, and sometimes that's a barrier for some artists, because they think that if they don't do the perfect work, someone is going to say that, yeah, this is not perfect enough. That doesn't really matter. I think it's going to get there. That's the whole idea of visual effects, that you're going to get there at the end, because everyone around you is there to help you. So you use the tool, do your best version, and then be ready to do the next one, and then do the other one, and then the next, and then the next, and it's going to get better. So yeah, fail fast. Feel free to fail as soon as you want, but just crack on doing it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, and just also let things go a little bit with that also. And then a commercial I did right when I started with VFX, with a green screen outside the window, and it was terribly lit, and it just horrible. So I had to roto everything, and hair flying, and shaky camera, and track that also, like, totally horrible, doesn't look good at all. But man, did I learn a lot. How to do things quickly in After Effects and just get it out. And I could have been on that shot for months.
You could be on it right now.
Yeah, and it still wouldn't have looked good. So it's like, learned a lot.
I think one more important factor is that everyone who I know in this community is quite, these guys are willing to help everybody. So reach out and talk to people who are in this business, or do things that you want to do, and they are really willing to help. I mean, besides a few very big trade secrets, I think everyone will help you to understand how that shot was made and what needs to be done to get there. Just ask around.
For
I
sure.
think.
Yeah, the visual effects community is actually, I think, fairly accessible, which is what's really wonderful, and most people want to help each other out. I think there's a stigma about social media that you're worried that a lot of people are interested in you failing at something, but in this community, really a lot of people are rooting for your success, or for you to do something well, because that's inspiring to everybody else. And so don't be afraid of how the world at large will react to something. Once you get it out there, they will help if they can help, and if they want to hate, they can. But it's a very boring.
When I first joined the team, I've been at Adobe for a number of years, but I've been on After Effects for about 7-8 years, something like that. But the product manager at the time told me something that was super funny. He says, After Effects is kind of scary, but I want to do marketing for After Effects. I had a lot of background in NLE and editing. And he says, Michelle, don't worry. It's like a biker gang. Once you fight your way in, you're in. And it's always stuck with me.
That's pretty good. Yeah, After Effects, I know it has a harder entry point than a handful of other apps, but I think that there's a huge community of creators who know Photoshop, and they know it super well, and those same people probably edit well, but they're afraid of this box over here. They don't know what it does. And I used to teach After Effects to some of the storyboard artists at DreamWorks, and something that was super helpful for them was seeing me. I literally made this little animation that was me going into Photoshop, where they all are very comfortable and cozy, taking the layer stack and dragging it down to the bottom of the screen over here, and then pulling out a timeline and saying, it's just your layers and what they can do over time. That's what you're doing in here anyway. This program does that. And a remarkable number of them said, oh, I didn't know what any of that did. And it's just a slightly different layout. It's Photoshop with an editorial layout. And so if you can do Photoshop and you edit your own videos, you should absolutely be trying After Effects.
One of the former product managers for Photoshop used to say that After Effects was Photoshop on wheels.
It's pretty much, yeah, I agree with that.
So speaking of that, I'm going off script, so here you go. What is the most logical progression of learning After Effects? They don't necessarily teach After Effects in school unless maybe you go to a specialist, like a design school. And you have to kind of choose your path when you're in college. So you like, and that will be an editorial path or design, graphic design. And most of the After Effects users today learn After Effects outside of school, or it's in addition to them going on to like Video Copilot, or in your case, you do some training as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I do a series on the Red Giant YouTube page called Cheap Tricks. It's a longer format tutorial series where I'll see a recent movie and say, oh, you could do that at home with this set of effects in After Effects, and walk you through the whole process of doing it. And the main reason I'm in that business is because I grew up watching Andrew Kramer's tutorials, every single one of them, and Aaron Rabinowitz's tutorials on Creative Cloud. They taught me how to do everything I know in After Effects. I never went to a schooling for them, but I loved the way that they taught and communicated, and it was just neat to see people who work in that environment trying to teach other people how to do that. And yeah, it was inspiring. I want to try to do it at least as well as those guys ever did for me.
I told Andrew that 60% of the people who learned After Effects learned it from him, and he looked at me like I would have 3 heads. He goes, "Is that even possible?" I'm like, "That's my statistic." How about you?
For me, I got surprised it wasn't more actually. Like, yeah, Andrew has been a great source of information on like coming over that fear to start doing visual effects, and there is bunch of tutorials, like everything you would want to know, it's out there to read or to watch tutorials and to like move along at home at the same time.
Yeah. How did you learn? You came from an art director position,
Yes.
so your path was a little bit different.
Yeah, I came from the let's do it in Photoshop kind of like school. But what I really enjoy about After Effects is you mentioned the biker gang, and I'm the guy who has a bike and puts a bit of nitro in the tank and cranks up things here and there just to see when you can break it, because I really enjoy experimentation. So you have to learn the basics. I absolutely agree with that. And your analogy of Photoshop plus the temporal element, I think that's perfect and it's really helpful. But I like to see what's going on if I stack up hundreds of layers on top of one another and invert the whole thing and then invert it again. Is there something there? Is there a noise pattern that I can see? I think it's a beautiful tool to be able to experiment. And I think that sort of like brought me into After Effects quite a lot. And then I learned all the basics, and I hope. And yeah, it's, just go on and experiment.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, to get back to like what path do you take to get into After Effects? I think there are a million that you could, but usually if you do something that you really want to get done that you don't know how to do, if you can figure it out alongside After Effects will be like your best buddy for life, because it'll solve all these little problems that you didn't know how to do. Like if you have a tripod leg in shot, or a lighting in frame, or a boom, or something like that, start with something you have to do, and then move on to things that you want to do because you saw them in a movie, and honestly just like rip off somebody and mimic something, and you'll learn a lot. And whether that pulls you in a visual effects direction, or you're in a motion design element where you saw a cool commercial where they did something really amazing with the silhouette of something and you want to do that with your own logo, try it. And whatever you're passionate about is what will really drive your passion behind any software you use.
So I'm going to transition a little bit. The theme of this is how to achieve realistic visual effects. So for you, Jacob, visual effects often cost a lot of money. Okay? And you could probably answer this too. How were you able to produce a film that was rich in visual effects with little to no budget?
For me to be able to do very good and realistic effects, I wish to be like connected in pretty early before the director and the photographer sets the images. Probably around the same time, so I can come in and they say, "Oh, we want this image," and I can there come up with a solution to say, "But okay, but if we have this in the image, or just move it a little bit, we don't need to do all these different kind of effects to save time in the long run." I also love working with special effects, so effects on set. For example, in the feature that we made that we're going to talk about later today, we have a flying helicopter in the shot, and a helicopter is pretty hard to do real, costs a lot.
Especially blowing it up.
Exactly, and the helicopter is also very hard to sell because it's not interacting with anything. It doesn't have its shadow on the ground or touching stuff. So our solution for that was to have an extremely bright headlamp on a drone flying around wherever the helicopter was supposed to be, and having that light directly in the camera, having a gigantic lens flare. So we had the 3D helicopter later, tracked it in the center of the flare, and just hit it behind the flare with screen blending mode. And we didn't need to do that much more because the majority of what the user was seeing, the viewer was seeing, was real. And like it really sells those
Really
shots.
sells the shot. Yeah. Do you have
So
any comments? Go ahead.
we have a small like set in our a small saying that at least 70% of what the viewer is seeing should be real. Doesn't mean that the 30 is 3D, but the other 30 can be filmed plates, like from what's the name? Action VFX and Action Essential and those kind of things. That's real because it has real integration with everything and good real lighting. So you don't need to have 3D and simulating a lot of stuff. And like you can just throw stuff out there and it will feel real.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, like what you said, like planning ahead of time is a really good way if you know you're on a very limited budget. If you get to talk to the creators ahead of time and figure out what they want to represent on screen and plan it well with them, it'll go a lot better. And then I would say the second part of that is if you're trying to mimic a big blockbuster action movie style and you know what the examples are of the people who are trying to create that scene, you rip them off. It's sort of like it's like when you see an amazing website, and if you're a starting designer, half of the design work is like kind of ripped off, and it's because people have done a lot of hard work figuring out what works cinematically well to sell an explosion. Why does it look good in that thing? And you get all these shortcuts by doing research of other people who have done something well to know that explosion worked really well in this movie, and we can buy a stock explosion and make sure we have all the elements that are visible in this other thing, and try to go from there. Use the other films as research and try to mimic them, because the exploration work is a lot of the difficulty and a lot of the expense in bigger filmmaking.
Do you have any tools that you would recommend that also help you do to make kind of that big budget look with no resources?
2, 3, 5 bars. No, yeah.
Actually, that really helps. I think that's pretty cool when you see those. We are looking at something cinematic.
Yeah, I mean, like hardware, first of all, is catching up remarkably well. I shoot everything on an iPhone, and
Do you really?
Yeah, and
Fabulous.
it's fabulous. I mean, I get really wonderful results, and it's pretty great. But yeah, I would say it's more I mimic the feel of movies a lot better than I do. Like if you were to analyze or scrutinize any of my frames, they're pretty slapped together. But it also showed me over time how quickly to let something go once it's selling what you want it to sell, especially in the context of a 10-second video. I mean, I have less pressure than when I was working on Mary Poppins, and it was a super expensive big shot that needed to be realistic and it was going to be seen a million times, needed to be ready a year ahead of the release, which was absurd.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and like you said, the technology is really catching up. But also what we did for the movie was we shot the whole thing on really old vintage lenses that you can get for like $20 on eBay, and they have beautiful characteristics. And we also added a paper that we cut out an oval shape and put in front of the lens. So all the bokehs, the blurry parts, looked like it was from anamorphic lenses. So that's $20 lens and, I don't know, 5 cents of paper. And you have an anamorphic look for your movie.
I think the only thing that I could add to this brilliant list is everyone who's interested in this kind of world should learn photography or learn how the camera works, because we always forget that, or sometimes we forget that we don't see the images through our eyes. It's not happening right in front of the eyes. It's happening in front of a camera, and we see what the camera sees. So if you have a better understanding of what the camera does, how lenses work, and focal lengths and distances, and is it realistic to use a shallow depth of field? No, it's not always, but you have to learn why it's not realistic. And it's fairly easy to do. I mean, like, people are taking pictures for more than 100 years now, so there's a lot of information on what makes a beautiful picture, composition, and all the basics. I think you all agree that these are very, very important things to learn on top of the actual tools. And if you combine that with the solutions that After Effects, for example, provides you with, you're onto something.
You recently worked on Dark Crystal.
Yes, correct.
Yes. And you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually picked up a new tool that you didn't normally use. Is that right?
Which one you think of?
I was thinking about Substance. Did you?
Oh, yeah, Substance, absolutely. Which is, as far as I know, is a fairly new member of the Adobe family.
Yeah.
And I think it's a texture painting tool, and it really brings back fun into texture painting, especially when you work with large models and huge polygon counts and UV maps, multiple UV maps and UDIMs. It becomes a little bit tedious to enjoy the painting process. But what Substance does, it gives you back some of the control that you have with traditional painting. So if you have a sort of like a drawing pencil or whatever, you can really mimic the way it feels to traditionally paint a model. And it's brilliant. It's lovely. I love it. I want to use it on everything.
That's exciting to hear. What type of trends do you guys see in VFX today? Do you have anything that you're kind of particularly seeing in today that intriguing to you that we should be taking a look at?
I think the only trend that I see is the speed at which they can be produced in a way, and that can apply really broadly across the industry.
Sure.
Like you see people on YouTube making these cinematic quality things at absurd speeds, or making a parody of an action expensive movie really quickly. And so what I think it juxtaposes really well is the big slow machine of making a giant feature film where there are a lot of questions and a million people weighing in, compared to the individual artist who needs to have more tools all accessible to them to make something quickly and with kind of a more singular voice. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think some of those people will become really good storytellers because they have all these tools in their belt to begin with.
I was having a conversation with Eric Dempsey, who did he did the movie titles. I totally did not even plan this. Can you tell? For the Netflix, he did the Netflix titles that won the Emmy.
The rainbow stripe.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I was having a conversation with him, and he went this long process with backlit, and he did this with old lenses, and he did all the special effects. And I said, "Yeah, have you ever looked at the YouTube tutorials on your title series for Stranger Things?" And he's all, "There's an easier way." Like it was like, I go, "Yeah, oh yeah, they're saying this is how it's done in After Effects," and he's like, "Oh, if they only knew what I went through to get to that point."
I think sometimes that happens, that people do things just because they can. So if you have a lot of very expensive gear at your disposal, you tend to use it. So with that being said, being an independent filmmaker or someone with a very limited budget sort of like limits your creative options. Therefore, you're going to be more creative with those tools that you have. And I think that's as you said, these big films have hundreds and thousands of artists and companies working on them. And if you work individually, just do it. I think that would be my advice. Just do it.
Just do it.
I think because you'll find out what works and what not.
One of the things you said specifically is that you guys are all saying challenge yourself, and don't be afraid of failing and learn new things. And you you learn new things constantly.
Absolutely. I try. I'm slightly sort of like I'm over my 40s, but I think it's never too late to pick up new things, and I'm always impressed by very young people how fast and quickly they can go out and break things, and that gives me great ideas. Oh yeah, I never thought of that. Let's try that. So I think you have to always learn. Once you give up learning, and once you give up being curious about the world around you and new techniques and stories, then you give up. You should never give up. Just go on and do the thing.
I agree.
Woo!
Yeah. Yeah. And like one of my hobbies is just to see different kind of new technology. Like a couple of years ago when VR started to come up more and more, and now it's like pushing more than ever into the film industry to use with camera tracking and cheap motion controls and body tracking and all those kind of things, and it's becoming pretty cheap. Like anyone can just go and buy it in a store, bring it home, and then you have a full body camera tracking system that like 10 years ago cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, I can't wait for you guys to see what next year brings about that.
Excited. Yeah, I mean, I think that real-time technologies are one of the most fascinating things to see the creative uses of out in the world. And there's sort of this looming thing that I always think about with the visual effects community, which is what machine learning and cloud computing will eventually do to the world, where in 10 or 12 years we might not have physical computers anymore that we have to tinker with because we log into a cloud-based system, and we may not have to do rotoscoping anymore because a computer, probably hopefully an Adobe tool, can cloud compute that for me.
Smart man to plug that technology.
So yeah, it's remarkable to see what people can put their computers to work doing. I mean, there are some individuals who've done amazing, like deep-fake, funny videos on YouTube that are remarkably convincing, more than things that I've seen major studios try to simulate. So it's an interesting world to see.
One of the things is we just released for After Effects Content Aware Fill, which was Adobe Sensei, and it basically removes objects such as boom mics or whatever out of your video, and it looks really simple, but it took us 7 years for us to develop that. And then you had mentioned something earlier. There was something interesting that you shared regarding content aware fill.
No, I mean I love content aware fill. It's one of the bizarre things that it feels so intuitive what it does and how naturally it should be able to do something. I don't remember what I said earlier.
Oh, okay.
But I do love using it for things. It's half of my work is usually a hidden cut and then erasing somebody from a video. So the very first thing that I did when Content Aware Fill came out, I was traveling in Mexico, so I was on a flight and saw the announcement for it. So I logged in with my phone to my home system, updated After Effects, and then tried it out on a piece of footage that I had shot in Mexico, uploaded it from the plane, and then posted it to Twitter from the plane, and it was this remarkably good result.
It was legit. It really
legit.
worked. How does technology play such a role in terms of like? Do you ever reach a point where technology fails and you need to come up with something different, or do you really feel like you can solve the problem with resources, plugins, what have you?
I personally kind of like when technology fails, because that's when it gets really exciting. That's,
nice.
as I said, let's break it, and then let's see how that break looks like. With that being said, I think it's always really good if technology is reliable. And for day-to-day work, I think it's crucial that you can rely on something that delivers results. But yeah, I think use the tools at your disposal to do the best that you can do with them. And
absolutely,
if it's like,
yeah, there's always more than one way to do stuff. So it's always good to, like, if you know one way to do it, like, try another way, because when the first one fails, and it sure will do someday, then you already know the next, like, how you can solve that problem, and it happens a lot in VFX. So you always have to like think around stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I fail constantly, and that's what the majority of my day is doing, is like doing something that didn't work. But I always think of it as being like if you're in a garage working on a car that you're trying to fix, you might break it, or the car might fall off the riser halfway through you trying to do stuff. But at least in After Effects, I still feel like I'm in the garage and I have all the tools around me, and like I might need something more heavy duty that someone makes, and that's why plugins are amazing for After Effects, because they might solve the 3D problem or a particle problem or something like that I need to throw in there, and yeah, usually get the car running fine, at least to drive it out the door.
I think it's crucial to be like a magician, and if you have one way of doing things, a magician's best asset is when someone says, "Oh, I know how you do it. This is how you do it," and then you show, "All right, I do it with my hand behind my back." So if you have if you have more ways of doing the same thing, then the better you are. But, and that's experimentation, that's work, that's the curiosity that you have to put into these kind of jobs. I think.
For sure.
I always imagine when that question when I asked about technology getting out of your way, I just imagine the people watching this are probably like, yeah, Michelle, the answer to your question is have Actor X get out of your way and be faster. So I'm going to address that point right now because I know you're thinking that. The team is super committed to making After Effects faster and keeping up with your creativity. It is of paramount importance of our team to address that concern because we're talking a 25-year-old product that's been around the block a couple times. You can't really say that about technology today. And our goal is to make it faster and more efficient because creativity does not have boundaries, and your technology shouldn't be in the way of that. Do you find that in your everyday world where you're actually thinking about, all right, I can do this, but even though I'm doing this now, I'm going to go be this more creative next time. Do you feel like your thought and your creativity evolves over time when you work on a particular project?
Yeah, you always, or at least I always reflect back in everything I do, and like, oh, this was a bad decision to manually roto this person for 2,000 frames. When I could use roto brush, like, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I always feel like my creativity is faster than what I can put into video form. But the most comfortable place I am is once I have footage figured out and I have After Effects in front of me, I can do things as fast as I can imagine. Like I like doing things very, very quickly. And so any tool that will do it the fastest is what I will use for whatever effect it is. But I also get very tired of whatever I just did. And I have a backlog of 100 Action Movie Kid videos. Some of them just expire because I feel like I sort of did an explosion in the background of a thing before, and I want the next one to have like a creature running around. And I don't know how to do a creature, but like I'll figure it out by the time it comes around. And so I go online because there's a tutorial for everything. Of like, where do I get a creature? And how do I put it into this footage that I already shot a year ago? And how do I make it work? And how do I make this footage that I shot, I mean, sometimes 3 years ago or something like that? And like, how do I make it more interesting than what I did back then? And how can I make it look more interesting?
How do you get that creative in terms of like, I mean, your son is super cute and now your daughter's involved now.
Hide it behind a 3-year-old. No,
but how do you get that? How do you get that inspiration? Where does that come from?
I just stayed like a kid, I think.
Really?
Like I'm daydreaming constantly. I think everybody of the same like visual effects age as I was grew up with Star Wars and things like and movies that showed you on screen these things that you'd only imagine. And they were cutting edge technology at the time, but you grew up with this idea of what the aesthetic of seeing laser guns and explosions and spaceships in real life might be like. You've seen this amazing trilogy of films or something like that inspires your imagination. And now that I'm grown up enough to be able to use those software, I do very childish things with it. So what was it like having, because you've been doing Action Movie Kid
For how long?
I think close to 5 years now.
Okay, so in 5 years, you got 1 million followers. People spend years and years and years more than that. What is that like? I mean, what is that? What goes through your mind? How did this happen, or what does that do?
It's very bizarre because it was something that the first day that it went successful was a very big surprise to me. I had been creating the videos and posting them on Facebook because I thought I had a lot of friends with kids that would they'd be posting videos of their kid taking their first steps or things like that, or making a mess in the kitchen, and they were kind of funny. And I thought, oh, I should do ones where they're incredibly dangerous looking or something horrible happens. And so I share them on Facebook with my friends, and then my parents who are not on Facebook, I would put them on YouTube and email them links to them.
Oh, wow.
And so from that, they were out in the public on YouTube and went viral one day, where we got 1 million views of some random video and all this attention that I thought would last a week or so.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest reason we keep doing it is because it's so close to what I did when I was 14. Just filming things
What
with a
you
camera
imagined.
and then messing with them later. And it's my favorite thing to do. And so it's so easy to want to do your favorite thing. So that's why I say for the visual effects track, whatever your favorite thing is,
Just do that
move in
and
that
do it
direction
well,
and keep
because
on moving in that
you
direction.
actually did commercials for Toys R Us from that, and that's crazy.
That was crazy. I got to, based on the action movie kid videos, Toys R Us had seen them, and which I think is remarkable, they hired me to do it instead of mimicking it, which they could have totally done. But they hired me to direct. Ended up being 60 commercials that summer and winter. I put them right out of business, but it was really fun while we got to do
Good
it.
job.
We got to do this. I thought I was going to go in there with my iPhone and film these kids doing this stuff, and then I showed up and I found out that it was like $100,000 a day shoot with a DP who didn't deserve to be there, and all this other stuff. But it was a really fun learning experience because we were all kids doing goofy stuff in a toy store, and everyone comes alive doing that kind of stuff, which is really great.
That leads me to my last question. Tell me about a happy accident, Peter. Like something you did it out of a passion of yours, and either it was an accident or it was a failure that turned into a great thing. Anything like that?
That's a very good question, and I would have said it was my previous occupation as a rock star, but no, it wasn't like that. I think
Here you are.
I think happy accidents are definitely part of my sort of like workflow, if you will, because I always allow a bit of time for myself to do things that I know they are not going to work. Again, just to give you a bad example, stacking up layers on top of layers on top of layers till it breaks, till it's just a mess of a frame. But what can I do with that? What happens if I just use a part of it and then, just use that as a noise or something else? Does it mean anything? Not really, but sometimes visually beautiful things can happen when you allow a bit of experimentation. And I'm a firm believer that you have to do this to get those happy accidents. I mean, they're never planned, are they?
never planned.
Sometimes they are, but most of the time not. So play.
Have you
I would
ever
say.
been in like a meeting with a client and you're like, here's a rough of what I'm thinking, and they're like, no, don't change anything? Has that ever happened?
No.
No. Okay.
That's the honest answer. No. So I was quite close to that sometimes, especially back in the advertising days. But the more people think about things, the more critical they become, and the more sort of like second guess their initial thoughts. So, no. Never happens.
Anything to add to that happy accident?
Okay,
Either one?
yeah. It feels like every day is a little happy accident in some way. At least for me, I'm always like playing and tinkering with stuffs and see like, oh, how does this tick, and break it a little bit like you talked about, but also in the physical world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and but if we go into After Effects, for example, like, what happens if I blend this with this and solo this layer, or I accidentally deleted this, but it became so much better. And that's to never be afraid to destroy stuff.
For sure. I think that just trying to keep yourself open for the connections in life, and whether that's like you realize you can make a really cool noise pattern by doing this bizarre thing in After Effects, or bug become a feature, kind of experimenting, and just remember that for the next time you happen to need it. And the same thing in life. If you may come across a handful of things that could be opportunities that, if you're not open to them at the time, that either the door will close or you'll move on. But if you're always looking for something or a next branch or something like that, you'll be more receptive to it, and it allows you to expand in directions you'll have no idea that you might have gone. For me, like backyard videos to an animation studio for 10 years to YouTube to a software company. I could have never predicted any of that.
Yeah, totally. I have made movies from when I was small, but I never imagined to work in VFX. I actually only have a degree in music, but I got interested in audio for film. Started doing that, but it couldn't be full time, so I started doing effects, and that moved over to only effects, and now I'm here.
Fantastic. I'm going to open up. We're only going to take a couple questions, and I'm going to repeat your question. If anybody in the audience has a question that might be our esteemed panel can answer, does anybody? Nobody?
Give us
Okay. Come on. All right. Well, I am going to thank you guys very much for attending. It was super, super fun and pleasure just getting to know each one of you. And I thank you again. And
Thank you very much.
for
Absolutely,
joining
yeah.
us on the live stream, you guys. We will have a live stream tomorrow at 3 o'clock, at noon. Tomorrow at noon, Amsterdam time. So please join us again for that panel. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, streamers.